Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our morning coffee time. Can people hear me okay and see me okay? I made a few changes, which is always a dangerous thing to do before going live. So maybe somebody can let me know. Okay, good. Thanks, Alexander. I appreciate that. So welcome to Tuesday, May the 13th. Good to see so many people returning and tapping in for our morning coffee time, beginning our day. Hope you all had a chance to do a little meditation and chanting this morning to start your day. And I hope you have a cup of coffee or tea. So we have a half hour here before we get going. I'm inspired to focus in on the theme of the hindrances for a little while, but I didn't have enough time this morning to check a few references, so I don't know how far we'll go into that. But just briefly, while people are still logging in here, I had a nice chat with Ajahn Sudanto yesterday, and we've been making preparations for him to come up and spend the summer here. So he'll be coming up early June 8th, to spend the summertime at least. And Ajahn Say could be going back to Baigiri, and might be exchange of monks at that time. I think there's another monk down there that would like to come up. So there'll be a few changes coming up in a couple weeks with that. So, and maybe the other little bit of news is for those who are tuning into the evening chanting. For the next little bit, we are chanting the Cardinal Suttas. So that is the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the setting of the wheel of Dhamma into motion, held to be the Buddha's first formal teaching after his enlightenment. And it's the core of that sutta really is the teaching on the Four Noble Truths. The second of the Cardinal Suttas is the Discourse on Not Self or Non-Self, the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta. Lakkhana is a sign, so it's like the sign of anatta, the sign of not self. So one of my favorite suttas of all time, and really the canonical are the place that one should go and study to understand what the Buddha means by not self. All kinds of other philosophers and spiritual traditions later came up with notions of self and not self and whatnot, and it's important to understand what the Buddha was pointing to and how it relates to the bigger goal of overcoming dukkha in one's life. So, and then the third of the Cardinal Sutras is the Adita Pariyaya Sutta, known as the Fire Sermon. And that's a teaching using the imagery of fire given to a huge group of fire worshippers. There were a pair of brothers, or maybe it was three brothers, known as the Kassapa brothers, who had a huge following, and they were fire worshippers of one type or another, and they had some encounters with the Buddha. And the eldest of the brother most famously thought the Buddha was impressive, but not an arhat like him, and the Buddha displayed a series of psychic feats to try to shake him from his mistaken notion that he, meaning the elder Kassapa brother, was an arhat. And finally, it kind of breaks through his overestimation, and he gains faith in the Buddha and realizes there's more for him to do spiritually, and converts, as do all of his followers who were matted hair ascetics. And if you haven't read the story, it's a good one. They cut off their hair, their dreadlocks. So they are dreadlock sadhu yogis wandering around the Magadhan plains of India. They go forth and become disciples of the Buddha, cut off their hair and throw it in the river. And his younger brothers with their disciples were camped downriver and saw the hair floating down the river and knew something was up. And in a short time, they all became not just disciples of the Buddha, but arahants. So I think it was 1,000 or something. But that's the backstory for the Adita Pariyaya Sutta, which is the fire sermon. And it's a teaching on the six senses using the language and the imagery of the senses burning. The eye is burning, forms are burning, the ear is burning, sounds are burning, the nose is burning, the odors are burning. Burning with what? Burning with greed, hatred, and delusion. So for those of you who were joining us for the retreat and contemplating the six senses, this is a good place to go to get a slightly different reflection on sense contact and the trouble that arises dependent on sense contact. So in the evenings, we're going to be chanting those. I think what we'll do is we'll go through one each night and then repeat to give variety. And it's something that we haven't done communally here for a while, so it'd be nice for us to kind of rehearse. It was a little rough last night on the first pass through, so we'll get it a little more refined as we're going through it. And for people that like the Pali, it's a great opportunity. It's almost 20 minutes of Pali chanting. We'll start with just a very brief homage to the Buddha, and then we'll go into the chanting of the Pali there. And I don't know, we'll see how it goes. And feel free to share some feedback on these morning coffee times if people are wanting more or less of that. My thought was we could do it for at least a couple weeks so that we could become more fluent with it. If you're not interested in the Pali, there's many things you could do. You could do something else in your life and not be on YouTube watching that. You could read through and contemplate the English as it's being chanted, which is kind of beautiful. It's really nice to kind of get, come into your meditation space, pay respects to the shrine, join us for the preliminary homage, and then sit there. And as the monks are chanting it, you can listen to it and go through slowly and just read it. And at some point, we'll probably do these in the English language, but our song has never worked out a really nice way to do it in English. So when we go to the English, we'll probably just read it in a more reflective way. But there's great value in that. So we'll be spending some time with that, and people are welcome to join in. Of course, you could just meditate. You could just start your meditation and listen to it. That can be nice as well. So a little later today, I'm going to have a meeting online with the stewards up at Birkin and Chevy, who was our organizer, both for the original Birkin retreat, when we thought we were all going to go to Canada and be at Birkin, but also for the virtual retreat. And we're just going to be doing a little review to see what we can learn, what worked, what didn't work. If we do this again sometime, what might we change in experience. So today, probably maybe the last day that I'll let this be a bit of a focus, but if people haven't shared their feedback with me, I would invite that either in brief this morning, or you could send me an email at hermitage@abhayagiri.org. That's on our community tab, or you can find it on our website, pacifichermitage.org. And I'm particularly interested in sort of like the pros and cons for you in your life, and practice situation, or maybe you can break it down by best, worst, or more, less, or this was my favorite thing about the retreat, this was my least favorite thing about the retreat. And we've got a little bit of good feedback already, but we're going to sum that up today. So if people have the time to share some extra feedback, that would be welcome. So and I do have Skype open if somebody just wanted to call and do a brief sharing on that. So we could take a Skype call, or people could just type little things in here. So let's see. Question from Alexander. Would you like a review of the retreat by email? Yeah, that would be nice, Alexander. So send it to hermitage@abhayagiri.org. That's our main email address. And you can get that through the website, or maybe I can even type it in here. So you can get the spelling right. Hermitage@abhayagiri.org. Speaking of like and dislike, Samrit has a question here. Hi, Ajahn. When you say we need to come out of like and dislike, does that mean that we should keep withstanding toxic people and environments? Not if you don't need to. And you need to know time and place, Samrit, and your strength, and being able to handle difficult people in difficult environments. Sometimes we have the mistaken emotion that we should be a saint before we really have done the work, or that it's skillful and beneficial to challenge ourselves. And while it is, it's positively unskillful to give ourselves challenges that we're not ready for. So, think about the relationship that you have with people and what your commitment is to them. So if it's just a casual friend and, they always want to complain or engage in some way that brings you down, or isn't fulfilling in your life, then, you might see if you can change that relationship in some way. And sometimes that means ending it or avoiding those types of people. Many people just have a bad habit. They don't know what to talk about other than the weather. So the way they seek connection is through criticism and complaining, or picking fights with people. And, they just haven't realized that there's a better way to be, and there's a better way to seek friendship, companionship, connection. So, and they can't help themselves. So, and I don't encourage people to waste their time. Life is precious. So, I heard an interesting quote the other day from the famous scientist James Watson. It's kind of secondhand. One of the podcasts I listened to, both the host and the guest had interactions and meetings with James Watson, who's quite old now. The Watson of Watson and Crick, most famous for their work on discovering the structure of DNA, the double helix structure. And he said something to the effect of, avoid boring people. Yeah, that's it. Avoid boring people. And it's a double entendre. So don't waste your time with people that are boring, meaning not engaged in anything that's really adding to your life or enhancing your life, but also refrain from boring people. So I think I'll endeavor to do that. Let's see if Sarima. Pali chanting is more familiar with us Sri Lankans. We've done it from our earliest childhood, yet Ajahn Sudanto's chanting is so beautiful. Anumodana. Thank you, Sarima. I'm not trying to make it beautiful, but I'm also not trying to torture anyone with it. So we're trying to make it palatable and sincere. And it's interesting, there's very different styles in the different Theravadan countries. So here's what I was looking for. So Phil says, I can't think of anything I would have changed about the retreat. I learned so much. Oh, it's nice. I think one of the best pieces of feedback we got was it would have been nice, especially for the people who had originally committed, to have a little more private way to do questions and answers and interact. And that's something that I think I would experiment with if we do another retreat like this. Brandon, Ajahn, what's a skillful way to practice right speech when being engaged with gossip from family and friends? Yeah, that is a difficult one. I mean, there's a whole host of skillful strategies, Brandon. It's not easy. I think there's such a deep habit in us that's both conscious and unconscious that seeks not just approval, but to kind of harmonize with others. And it's part of our social nature as human beings. You can say correctly that we're social animals. And something I like to contemplate a lot is the social nature of consciousness. And I remember a couple years ago just contemplating this a little bit and thinking, in an inspiring way, it's kind of beautiful. Despite your addiction to liking and disliking and personal preference and whatnot, you can't help but be influenced by your environment and the people that you're around. And there is an automatic process of realignment and adjustment so that we share more and more, or we're in some sort of sync or some sort of harmony with the environment and also the people that we are in relationship to. And you'll find this manifesting in all kinds of little ways. Like if I spend much time with somebody, I notice I start picking up on their mannerisms, some of the language they use, some of the way they use language, like inflection or tone or pacing. And I've seen some striking examples of that in my life. My brother lived in the South for a little bit, and his first wife was from Alabama, and it didn't take him long at all to start developing a Southern accent. And then they moved out of the South, and then that slowly sort of went away. It wasn't intentional. It's just this kind of, there's this part of us that tries to harmonize. And this is why we need to take the Buddha's encouragement to choose wisely our environment and choose our friends and who we associate with wisely. And family and friends should not be excluded from that determination because it's such a huge part of our life. Now, we don't choose our family, but we do and we should choose how it is that we're going to interact with them, how much, in what kind of ways. And most people really are looking for a relationship and connection. And if you are willing to engage with them on a way that is unskillful, low, base, trivial, frivolous, then that's where the relationship will stay. And so much of where people spend their time in relationship isn't all that, mm, isn't really leading to the betterment of us. Sometimes it's not all that effective in helping us grow and be our better selves. And sometimes people appreciate the effort to sort of rise up. And I've seen skillful examples of that before. And especially with family and friends, like if you're kind, patient, not overly critical or judgmental, but you just sort of set boundaries, usually people are willing to adjust. So, if they want to engage in all kinds of negativity, uh, you can very skillfully try to sort of redirect the conversation. But sometimes, if the tendency is really strong to go in that direction, you say, I don't really want to spend the time we have together dwelling on what's wrong with the world, you know, or politics is another kind of dangerous one with family. You have family members or friends that have very different political beliefs, and it can be possible sometimes to say, I love you too much, I care about you too much to ruin our relationship because we don't see the world in the same way, or we don't hold the same political beliefs. So, there is space to challenge people and to rise up above it. And where they're incapable of that, Brandon, then you might just moderate or make changes. And how, when, where, for how long that you relate with people that aren't willing to join you on this journey of maturation and spiritual betterment. So, and so, yeah, those are a few thoughts there on that. I see Tondon's joined us. Good morning, Tondon. Mm. That's funny. Thanks for sharing that with us, Adil. I was very disinterested in religion and institutionalized religion, and I had a couple strange experiences when I was in university. Um, I studied fine art, and so as young art students are wont to, we would often debate about um, what really was art and what was important in the world and expression and what you should be doing as an artist. And this was in the late '80s, early '90s, and political art in the U.S. was becoming dominant, I would say, at that time period. It's like postmodernism and political art were really hot topics and a big focus in the art world. And I remember several times lobbying for a more elevated and humanistic, even slightly spiritual nature to uh, our engagement with art, uh, along the lines of using using our life and our interest in the fine arts to learn more about ourself and develop self-understanding and also learn how to be better people. And I remember once or twice having a couple conversations with my close friends, and one time one of my friends sort of said, "That's not art, Ajahn, that's religion." Um, and I and I got really mad. I was just like, "No, I'm not talking about religion. I'm not religious. I'm not talking about religion." Uh, and years later, that conversation came back to me, uh, like after I was a monk. And only then could I see, maybe in the same way, what that friend of mine was seeing. Mm. And then the other conversation I remember one time was this passionate conversation I had in a brew pub with a few friends. And again, if someone's just joined the stream, this is before I was a monk uh, in college, and I remember, just talking about our human potential and how we really should put forth effort to rise up and be better people. And and someone looking at me saying, "You expect too much of yourself and others. Like, what do you think? What do you think? You want to be Jesus Christ or something?" Uh, and I remember feeling really depressed, like because it was fairly universal at the table amongst my friends that we really should just concede that humans are broken and flawed, and we shouldn't expect too much of ourselves. And I remember feeling, wow, that's really unfortunate, because I really think we can do better. And and I'm fond of thinking of what the Buddha is encouraging us to do is to say just that we can do better. You know, um, I think everybody has a little Dhamma on some level, and a certain level of skillfulness, and a certain ability to overcome dukkha in their lives. But they settle at some point. They're only willing to put so much effort into it, or they're just reliant on their good conditioning, their good karma, and where they're at, and they're not making conscious effort to ask more themselves. And I love this saying. Ajahn Sona is often encouraging people, expect more. Expect more from your practice. And I think that's good if it held in the right way. Don't expect more so that you get too down on yourself and negative or despondent or give up, but inspire yourself with the model of the Buddha in your spiritual heroes, and even just the good examples that you see demonstrated by people that are there in your lives. Everybody has their strengths and their moment of glory, and demonstrates clarity, lucidity, kindness, generosity, patience, forbearance, great virtue at some moment in their life. And if we're sensitive to that and keen students of those wholesome qualities, then everyone can be our teacher and our mentor and inspire us in our practice. And I also consider it part of this practice of contemplating things both internally and externally. So, okay, well, we're coming up on 8:30. I think tomorrow I'll be ready to talk a little bit about the hindrances. So I want to keep those in people's minds. And just one last thing about the Birkin retreat that's been on my mind. And I'd be curious to explore this with people at some time here too. I'm really big on the value of commitments. And if you did the retreat and derive some benefit from it, it's good not just to go back to your normal life without making some sort of commitment to yourself. And I'm sure many of you have already. But it's one of the ways that we solidify and create a new point of mindfulness for ourselves through our practice. We run all these experiments in our practice, and we learn certain things. And in particular, retreats can be powerful learning experiences, because we shift our habits for a period of time, like whether it's going to a monastery or intensifying our practice. And there's a certain amount of effort and discomfort sometimes in running those experiments, and and going through those changes, but we learn something about ourselves, and we get in touch with, sometimes for the first time, or sometimes we're reminded of various spiritual and emotional qualities that are delightful and that we want more in our life, the benefits of various practices. And so it's good when you come out of that to at least make one or more commitments that are doable, and either for a temporal period of time, like a month, for the next month or whatnot, or maybe even for your lifetime. It can be good to make lifetime commitments for things that you think you can keep. And as Shelley's put the word in here, adhitthana is what it's called, determinations. And these can be a very powerful way to better ourselves in a progressive fashion. You run the experiment, you learn a little bit, and you make some determinations. You make some commitments to yourself. And so one thing I wanted to bring up for reflection today is just an encouragement before you get too far away from that period of retreat, to make a couple commitments to yourself that you think you can keep, either for the next month. Might be morning chanting. It might be taking up one of those practices in the Satipatthana in a way that you haven't yet taken up, like contemplation of the elements. Make a commitment to explore that more for a period of time. Several people were interested in taking up the 32 parts of the body. That's a very good practice, and you might not hear about it for another decade, because there's not a lot of teachers reminding us of that practice and how it sits within the broader efforts that we're making as practitioners. So, and I remember I had a very good friend who was a Sri Lankan monk, and he told me one time that on his birthday, on every birthday, he makes a new lifelong commitment to himself that will better him as a monk and a disciple of the Buddha. And it's fairly broad, I mean, he's really thinking about healthy mind, healthy body, how to advance practice. And like, for example, one of his determinations was to read, I think it was out loud or something, an hour of suttas every night before he goes to bed. And he was a busy monk. He taught, he ran several monasteries, so sometimes he would have to stay up a little bit extra to make that commitment. But, he had a love of the suttas. He was well studied. And it wasn't like learning new information. It's just like out of devotion to the suttas and stay connected to the sutta treasury, he knew that was a beneficial practice for him, and he just made that commitment. And several other ones. And I just thought it was a beautiful idea that I'd never come across in my life. Make a new commitment every year on your birthday, to some practice that you can keep and that will bring blessings into your life. So anyways, share that for your reflection this morning, and good to see everybody on the stream. We'll see you tomorrow morning, and don't forget to send me an email if you have any feedback. For me, are the stewards at Birkin. We're going to be meeting this afternoon to review the retreat and tie that project up and put it on the shelf for now and move on. So, all right. Be well, friends. See you tomorrow morning.